Good evening, I'm Joe Robinson, and this is the world premiere of Rush's new album, Test for Echo. Later, we'll chat with Alex Lifeson, Neil Peart, and joining us for the first portion of our broadcast is bassist, vocalist, Geddy Lee. Hi, Geddy.
Hi.
First off, congrats on the birth of your daughter.
Thank you very much.
I guess we know what you've been doing during the band's break, like 4 a.m. feedings and changing diapers.
Well, actually, she's very advanced. She's driving now, and she's been really quite easy. You know? She lets me sleep in, and she makes me breakfast. No, it's been let's say it's been a domestic time for me.
That's fabulous. It's been 3 years, Geddy, since Counterparts. 18 months of that spent away from your bandmates. Is that the longest break that you've ever taken from Rush since you formed?
Yeah, without question. You know, we hear all these stories about Pink Floyd and so forth, all these other bands that take 5 years off, and you know, for us to be away for more than 6 months is kind of an indulgence. And you know, I guess in retrospect, we look back and, well, it was 18 months without any Rush work going on, and you know, for us that's an eternity. But to I guess in the big picture of the history of a lot of bands that have been together for 20 years or so, which I guess there aren't too many of us left. I guess it's not that long, but it sure felt long, and by the end of it I was definitely ready to work again.
And ready to start with the next phase maybe of your career, part 2, I guess.
Absolutely. I mean, that time for me was very introspective, and I needed to get away from Rush. I needed to get away from music, period, and just kind of re-examine my life and make sure that I was living the kind of life I wanted to live, and enjoying all the domestic things that a lot of people take for granted, I guess, every day. But when you live on the road and when you're constantly touring, you miss that stuff. So it was great for me, but I started about a year through it, I started feeling like there was this hole in my life, and that was the need for me to express myself musically, and I was very ready to go back to work after 18 months.
Well, and as we listen to every song on Test for Echo tonight, Geddy, we will no doubt be able to tell that that's very apparent, that you guys came back with a bang, and people have been waiting for 3 years to hear something new from Rush. Geddy, when you and Alex got together last October, did you have an idea of which way you wanted to take this record musically?
Not really. You know, getting together after such a big break for us was a bit weird. You know, we kind of were circling each other like, you know, cats in a new territory. And Alex had just come off of, you know, a very exhausting experience in one sense, you know, working very hard on his own solo record, Victor,
yeah.
And and he'd been kind of used to doing everything, you know, engineering it, mixing it, you know. So I think he wasn't quite sure how things were going to go, just from the point of view of now he was having to become part of a democracy again, and, you know, democracy is tough, let's face it. It's much easier to be the king, you know.
Sure.
So I think he was a little tentative, and I think last time we wrote Counterparts, there was a little tension in the room from time to time, and I was feeling very laid back and very enthusiastic and really eager to write, so I was being, yeah, sure, whatever, let's go, you know, and I was being very positive, and I think that threw him a little bit for a loop, that I was, you know, being so easy, because, you know, I have a tendency to be a little bossy, so... Anyway, I think it was a lot of that going on, and Neil, you know, was being Mr. Aloof a little bit, and so we kind of circled each other, and we talked, and, you know, we knew that talking was going to be the key, and Alex and I spent a lot of time talking, and eventually Neil came into the picture, and we started talking, and before we know it, boom, we were back to writing, and we were just, ideas were just coming, and everything was fresh and exciting, and so we kind of let the record take shape on its own. I mean, to finally get back to your question you asked me about 2 hours ago, we let the record kind of take its own direction, and we tried not to be very contrived about it. The only, I think, prerequisite we put on the record was that we were going to stay with writing mostly on guitar, bass, drums, and vocals, and use keyboards only as kind of a secondary instrument.
When you're making records for 20 years together, and then you take quite a long break, as Geddy, you were saying. Did you and Alex approach the way that you interpreted Neil's lyrics differently than you had in the past?
Good question. I don't think our approach was different in the way we looked at Neil's lyrics, but we took a slightly different approach in assembling the songs. And
how so?
Well, usually we find a lyric we like, or we find a piece of music that we like, and we work it until it's a completed song. And then we bring Neil in, and he listens to it and get his opinion, and then we kind of polish it off and then move on. This time, for some reason, we'd start writing on one tune, for example, and we'd be really excited about an idea, and we'd be developing it, and we'd put it on tape, and we'd get it to kind of a point, and we'd be looking for another part for that song, and in the course of that, we'd find ourselves writing, hey, that's a great idea, but it doesn't really have anything to do with this song, so maybe this will work with this lyric, and we'll, I always like to keep Neil's lyrics kind of spread out in front of me in case something, fits something I'm working on. So that would lead us to start another song, and then the same thing would happen and would lead us to start another song. So before we knew it, we had about 5 or 6 songs under construction, so to speak, but not finished. And we got ourselves in the mode that we wanted to finish these songs before we played anything for Neil, because we were very confident about them and we felt really strong about the music. We wanted to complete it. And until Neil wrote the bio did I realize how frustrating it was for him for us to be, a couple of weeks writing all this stuff, and he still hadn't heard anything.
Neil, waiting in the wings going,
yeah,
okay.
Hello, can I hear something now? Like, I'm in this band too, So, I apologize to him for that, but we were just kind of on a roll and we didn't want to stop.
Well, I have had the honor of wearing out the batteries in my Walkman over the last several days listening to Test for Echo, and it seems as though you've got just a tremendously cohesive record from beginning to end. And Geddy, I would like for you now, if you could please, to paint a picture for us of you guys making the record. Initially, in its embryonic stage, were you in a house somewhere? Yeah,
well, there's this kind of farm-like studio that's on the outskirts of Toronto. And there's an old farmhouse, a country kitchen that has all the views of the house are quite beautiful, and quite an expanse of what used to be farmland. And on the border of this particular property, there are still some farms and a lot of trees. And way off in the distance, you can see the nuclear reactors. And
oh, lovely.
No.
Put a perspective on things.
Right. But it's, very bucolic kind of setting. And attached to the farm, a number of bedrooms, and attached to the farmhouse is, I guess what used to be a barn or something like that, but it's a big glass windowed environment that Alex and I set up our gear in. It's a studio. And Neil has his drums in one corner, and there's a control room upstairs. And we create our own kind of comfortable writing environment there, Alex and I, and we have our various tape recorders and all the equipment we need, and our stupid slogans that we pin on the walls and stuff like that.
Stupid slogans.
Yeah, there's a number of interesting slogans that, every album seems to have its own kind of thing we lock in on. This album we kind of locked in on stupid inspirational slogans. And
Can you remember any of them?
Well, there's a couple. If you twist my arm, I might listen.
Twisting.
One was, the key one, of course, was individually, we are a ass. Together, we are a genius, which you have to take in the right light. And stuff like, if you want something done right, just forget it.
That sounds like something I would say.
So anyway, this is our kind of goofy environment, and Neil locks himself up into the far end of the house, is his bedroom, that he has his computer and all his writing stuff in there, and he's also got a little electronic drum kit set up outside that area, so that if we're working on one song, he can be working on the drum parts for that in the far end of the house.
How do you communicate with each other if you and Alex are in one room and Neil is off somewhere else? Do you communicate with Neil during this part?
Oh yeah, we have a lot of communication. I say that now. But sure. I mean, we're working on the music, and we get it to a certain point, and I'm running back and forth in the course of the day, maybe 4 or 5 times.
That's why you're so skinny.
Yeah. Clarifying. Thank you very much for saying that. Clarifying, points of lyric, whether things I'm not sure I understand, or suggestions, or I'm working on something, and sometimes it's easy for him to answer if he's heard the music. If he hasn't, it's a little different. But I have to feel myself out with his lyrics to see what kind of license I can take in certain areas because if the melody's going in a different way. And usually he writes a lyric with a particular, pentameter or rhythm in mind, and I may have taken it in a totally different direction. So obviously some things need a little fudging here and there.
And you have to sing it, so obviously
Sure.
you want to... Alex Lifeson, guitarist for the band, has joined us. Hi, Alex.
Howdy.
You are looking so healthy.
I feel healthy.
You are tan, and you're blonde, and you're just looking fabulous, darling.
Yeah, it's been a great summer. I've enjoyed it a lot.
Well, you took 1.5 years off with the band, and you were working on the Victor record
Right.
during that. Did that experience change the way that you dealt with Geddy and Neil when you were putting together Test for Echo?
I think it gave me some confidence that perhaps I was lacking before working on projects like this. I mean, I'm the type of person that sort of takes a back seat a lot of times, and or at least I was that way. And when we'd start working, we'd kind of go along, and I'd sort of go along with things. And even if I wasn't quite sure that I was feeling right about a particular decision or not, quite often I would just go along with it. And I think Victor gave me the confidence in my playing as well as in my songwriting. I felt a lot stronger about what I believed in and what I thought was right for a song or for a part. The experience that we had with Test for Echo writing with Geddy and myself, because we worked so closely together, was really great on this record. We were both very enthusiastic and really dying to get back into it. And because I felt, I think, so good about myself in terms of working, I think he fed off that, and in turn I fed off him, and we were very aware of giving each other space, letting each other develop their own ideas as we progressed in the development of songs. So consequently, it was just a terrific writing experience for the both of us.
Do you think that taking 3 years off from the last Rush album has been a risk for the band?
Well, it depends on how you define risk. I don't think that it really mattered to us. We were taking the time off regardless. If it meant that it was over, then so be it. We needed to take a break after 20 years of this continuous touring. We needed to really touch base, get a little more anchored, and have the opportunity to experience other things in our lives. I mean, we've been doing this. Geddy and I have been in this band since we were 15 years old. It's been the center of our lives from adolescence through adulthood. And really, it was the time where we needed to separate ourselves from it. And I mean, he has a beautiful baby girl that he really wanted to spend time with. And we all sacrificed that time when our kids were young. And he didn't want to make that mistake again. And Neil always has many, many things on his agenda. And I really, given that time, I really wanted to do a solo record, not from some dissatisfaction that I had with Rush or with the way we worked, but it was time for me to do something like that for myself. So it was very constructive time that we had. And we're much better people for it, I think.
From the long Rush marriage to the slight separation and then maybe the honeymoon again, it seems to have come together beautifully. Alex, has there been a need for a co-producer? Do you think you really needed Peter Collins?
I think it's a wise decision on our part to have a co-producer. I think the three of us have collectively a very good idea of where we want the band to go and the way we want records to sound and how they're developed. But at the same time, we're very individual in our personal tastes and also in the way we see certain aspects of the band's sound developing. I think with a co-producer, such as Peter Collins, because he's such a great guy to work with. He's such a musical producer. He really draws all those things in and just adds a little cohesion to the whole thing in terms of decision making and where we go. I mean, really, I would say 80% of it is us.
Yeah.
But that 20% is a really important 20% that kind of gels everything.
He's kind of the mediator from the three minds of the band and
Yeah,
brings it together.
He's that as well as a voice on his own where, if we are not sure about a part or about a performance or something like that, we can bounce that off him, and he's an extremely responsible person in the studio. And it's great to have that, you don't have to worry about anything because Peter's there for it. We've worked with terrific people always, but Peter is definitely one of the best.
Now, Alex, Geddy had mentioned that it was a conscious effort of the band to strip down Test for Echo, to solely concentrate this time around on bass, drums, guitars. How did that bring your guitar playing out?
Well, I think it's something that we've been working towards. I think we've wanted to go back and catch some of the basic energy of a three-piece band. And it has been a conscious effort, but I'll say this. When we started writing this record, maybe about halfway through, after we'd gotten 4 or 5 songs written, it had already moved in that direction naturally. Just the things that Geddy and I were playing precluded having keyboards. There was no reason for it. So the development was quite natural. And the fact that I'd been playing almost continuously for a solid year, as I said earlier, it just gave me a little more confidence. I felt better about my playing and just dove into that role and the responsibility of coming up with parts that were solid enough for the other guys.
Fans are going to love the fact that there's a trademark instrumental tune on Test for Echo. It's called Limbo, and I understand that it's got something to do with Rush Limbaugh?
Absolutely nothing to do with Rush Limbaugh. We wouldn't write a song that had anything to do with him. We just thought it was kind of fun, the play on words of Rush Limbaugh. But we had a lot of fun doing that, as we always do with instrumentals. It was a last-minute thing with that song, as most of our instrumentals are. It's kind of an afterthought. Once we get everything out of the way, all the arrangements, all the development is done in pre-production, we kind of jump in and put an instrumental thing together for ourselves more than anything else, just to have fun with.
So it started out as an instrumental and it never had lyrics then?
No, it never. And it was written very late in the writing stages. We were already into pre-production. Neil was already working on all his drum parts for all the other songs when we kind of dumped it in his lap and said, here's another one for you to learn. And as late as doing the rhythm tracks in the studio, we were still making arrangement changes on that song. So it was really last minute, which was kind of fun because the pressure was on, and it was essential that we put it together in that given time.
It sounds like Whatever Happened to My Transylvania Twist.
Yes, mash good. Yeah, it's taken from the Monster Mash. It was a graveyard smash.
Yes, I knew that. I was thinking of Count Chocula, which is a cereal, but I was like, where did that come from? That was Limbo on our world premiere of Test for Echo. Alex is here with us, and Geddy was mentioning a little bit earlier, Alex, about how excited he was about the upcoming tour that begins on October 18th. Now, the band is known for releasing a live album after every 4th studio album, and it seems to me that it's time for a live album. Is that going to happen?
Well, nothing's written in stone at this point. We've recorded the last tour, as well as some older stuff that we have from other tours in the vault. And we'll likely record the next tour as well. Whether we'll do a studio or live album next, I don't know. We're kind of here right now, and that's a little bit in the future. Right now, we're more concerned with getting the tour together, and all the pre-production the machine has started to roll, and preparing for that. So
what do you do to prepare for that?
Well, meet with all the technical people and develop the show, how we want it to look, what we want to do. There's some thought as to doing an evening with rather than having an opening act on the next tour, which would be great for us. It would allow us to play a little longer than we normally do, and have a little more fun with it and make it maybe a little more of a special evening.
Alex, you're known as the inventor in the band. Was there anything during the making of Test for Echo, any little contraptions that you contrived?
Usually there is something that I do, especially when we're in those phases where everyone else is working. You have some spare time. I like to invent and doodle with things. But this time, I was quite busy all the time. But I did come up with an interesting egg cup holder, which actually Neil could tell you, because I made it specifically for him out of a vitamin bottle. So he could probably tell you a little bit about that.
Well, then that's what we'll do. We'll ask him about the egg cup holder.
Right.
Thank you. Alex Lyson, thanks for taking the
My
time
pleasure.
with us. Hang tight. We've got Neil Peart in the studio with us. Hi, Neil.
Hi, how are you doing?
Oh, just doing fabulous. The view is beautiful, and you look great. Looks like you've been doing a lot of working out, cycling.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Quebec.
We've saved a couple of the songs because we really liked your use of the lyrics, and one of them is Virtuality, off of the Test for Echo record. Do you spend a lot of time surfing the net?
No, ironically, or perhaps not ironically, having got the message of the song itself. But I certainly do dabble in anything new that comes along, and I spent a bit of time getting netted and explored around just to see what it could do, and just couldn't resist really poking a little fun at its pretensions.
Do you think that virtual reality has the potential to replace real life, Neil?
That's where my quarrels lay, really, because I think it is going to be the most excellent video game in the world when things like that are available. But when I think about traveling to places and thinking, how would you translate Palermo, Sicily, or Abidjan, Ivory Coast to virtual reality? The first thing they do would be to take away the smells and the garbage and defunkify it all and make it all Disneyfied. And that might make an ultimate video game, but it cannot possibly even approximate my experiences of those places. No virtual reality can take you to the top of Kilimanjaro or to Tiananmen Square or to the heart of the Sahara, and none of these places is accessible any other way but by suffering for it. So for me to pretend that there's an easy way to any more than approximate it, it can't be any more than a book or a movie or a TV documentary, except magnified, of course. Maybe you can add smells and sounds, and maybe you can add the feeling of the wind and so on. And that will be great. I have no problem with that. I love things like that, and it'll be a great sensual experience. But my only quarrel becomes with people who tend to pretend that it is as good as reality, and nothing's that good.
Well, if you're a Star Trek fan, it's almost like people on the Enterprise visiting the holodeck.
The holodeck, exactly. Yeah, and this is a wonderful thing, you know. That's why I'm not at all reactionary against these things. I see their wonderfulness with no problem at all. I see why they're really cool and lots of fun. But it's just that differentiation between reality and virtual reality that, as I said before, it can't be as good, and sometimes it can't be as bad. And I've had some really nasty experiences in parts of the world that might have been Disneyfied a little for my, enjoyability. But the fact is, that's how they are, and that's part of the experience, part of the suffering of getting to these kind of places is what you have to endure, and maybe the bad smell, and they add to it. And I mentioned Palermo, Sicily, because I was there recently, and it was a really funky place, but I loved it. The people were so great, and the place itself just had a charm. And when I was coming back into the town after being out in Sicily for the day, I was thinking, wow, this place is dirty and smelly and funky, but I love it. It just won me over despite any flaws. And that would be a case of where reality is, rife with reality, where all the dark sides of things are very present and to be endured or just wrapped into your package of things. And all of these sides of Palermo, for instance, just made it more charming to me. That's just the way it was, and I loved it all despite of and including all that.
If I can quote you, and pardon me while I do, some of the lyrics in Virtuality are, I can smell her perfume, I can taste her lips, I can feel the voltage from her fingertips.
Right, okay, well that's a perfect one to dwell on, because it points out a lot of the irony of what I was trying to get across is what happens in an email kind of relationship or something, is that imagination, of course, is called upon to make it come alive. Imagination, of course, is a wonderful thing, but it's also slightly dangerous because it invites illusions, and that's the illusion that I love the image of. That verse opens up with seeing a woman's face through the window in the rain, and that's a really romantic image, and I've had that experience, seeing it like a woman driving by in a car, or if I'm driving by and just see a woman in a window or something. It's a beautiful thing, and the same experience if I'm riding my bicycle down the road and a car goes by, sometimes I'll smell a woman's perfume. It's imagination, though. To me, it's a little bit of sense input, but the rest of it, if you put anything more into it, it's just imagination. So all I was pointing up there is, here's a romantic little image that is imagined. So let's not pretend that it's real. You know, you cannot feel the voltage from her fingertips, but you can imagine it. And that's all I was trying to say.
Neil, let's talk about you as the drummer. During Rush's break, you did the Buddy Rich tribute album, and you took drum lessons.
I thought it was about time.
Really?
Yeah, no, it was just a strange chain of circumstances that life treats you to sometimes, and it was just beautiful synchronicity that part of the reason, of course, for getting involved in big band music and the Buddy Rich tribute was a certain amount of restlessness of wanting to explore other areas. And in the course of that, I was introduced to Steve Smith's teacher, Freddie Gruber, and after 30 years, he was just exactly the guy. Like, there are any number of master teachers in the drumming world, but he was the only one who had what I needed to learn, which was a physical approach to the drum set, being more fluid and more circular. And in these times of the last 20 years or so, drummers have been increasingly disciplined into the rigid confines of click tracks and sequencers and electronic perfection. And most drummers, of course, have been able to rise to that challenge, which is some kind of an accomplishment, but it can often lead to a certain stiffness, too, of being so rigidly chained to a mathematical perfection. Music isn't necessarily meant to be that way. It's meant to ebb and flow and breathe in a natural way. And with a certain experience, you do learn to do that as a drummer. Even playing to a click track, you can make it appear to relax, and you can make it appear to become more urgent with the experience of manipulating that. But at the same time, I really wanted a looser, more fluid style in my playing, and of course didn't know how to go about it by myself. But Freddie was exactly the teacher. At 70 years old, he's been a teacher for about 40 years and has evolved a real understanding of how the body works in relation to hitting things with sticks, which is, you know, the elements of what we do. So I got together with him and basically restarted everything, changed completely the way I set up the drums, completely the way I sit at them, the way I hold the sticks, the ends of the sticks that I hold. Everything was completely rebuilt. So I just sat down in my basement day after day, practicing every day like a little kid, rebuilding these things because I was really eager to take this challenge on. You know, despite what it might bring in terms of results, I thought, this is great. Start all over. 30 years, throw it all away. And I really was starting from a whole different foundation, such that even things that I had known and learned all these years, I was coming at from a different point of view and applying them in different ways. So that just whole process was very interesting. And then by the time I got into working with the band, I was curious to see, of course, if it would apply, because after 20 years with the same musicians and a style that's been built around the band style, there was a certain amount of doubt of whether I would be able to use this and whether I might be just back into the way I used to play, which would have been okay too. It would still have been worth doing, but as it happened, it was broadly applicable to the way I used to play, and all the things I've learned have only become an addition to. So it, in fact, made a very satisfying way to spend a couple of years.
Do you think that you are a better drummer now?
That gets into, unfortunately, less than humble territory, but I certainly feel like I came to understand a lot of things that I didn't understand before, and I certainly feel as if I knew nothing before. So I guess that's some element of progress.
That's got to be discouraging for drummers, for you to say that you think that you knew nothing before.
Well, that's how it should be, really. I think, you know, no drummer can possibly think they know everything. You know, Buddy Rich didn't at the end of his life think that he knew everything, or think he didn't think he was great. He thought he was good, and he was trying to be great. And I think that's how we should all define ourselves, you know. If we achieve a certain level of control of the instrument after 10 years or so, then you might be good. But then to try to be great is something you have to earn every night, and with every performance, it's not something ever attained. You know, it's not a laurel that you're ever likely to be able to rest upon. So it's the way every drummer should face it, that, you know, if Buddy Rich at the end of his life, after playing the instrument all of his life for 70 years, didn't think he had attained it, then how does any of the rest of us expect to either?
We've talked to Geddy and Alex already about their excitement about Rush beginning another tour in 5 or 6 weeks. What's your take on it, Neil?
Well, everyone finds their excitement in different places, I find. For me, certainly the most enjoyable part of the process is always the going away and writing together and watching new things develop, and just having immediate feedback of making demos of a new song and hearing something you've just worked on that morning suddenly become something real. So that's certainly the most exciting part of it. Touring is probably the biggest challenge, because you have to go out there and deliver in a real-time basis, where there's no opportunity to stop the tape and go back. There's no opportunity to tear up the paper and start over again. Each night you walk up on that stage knowing that you carry a huge weight of expectation with you. Self-imposed is enough, never mind, you know, thousands of people expecting a certain level of performance from you. So I think it's something that's hard to step away from because it is such a monumental challenge, and it almost seems like cheating to leave out the hardest part. So I think touring for us has always represented that as like the ultimate peak. It's one thing to work in isolation and create the music and record it and be satisfied with it, but to go out and actually perform it in front of an audience is the most difficult thing a musician has to do, I think.
I was speaking with our producer, and we were talking about how at rock shows, everyone leaves during the drum solo, except at Rush concerts. Do you think that you'll be incorporating a solo in this show?
Oh, certainly so. Yeah, it's an important part of it for me, really, as a test bed. And I always find that during the course of a tour, it's one area where I can afford to take radical chances with fewer ramifications in terms of other musicians around me. So that's the case where I'll often be working on new ideas and themes that I want to develop further and explore and be a little more free with. So the solo is an important part of that, and it's also a structured performance for me. You know, it's not completely improvised either. I always have a framework. It's built like a song for me, beginning, middle, and end, and all the dynamics are considered so that the framework will remain consistent. What I do within that framework is the freedom that I'm allowed. So it's the best of both, really. I am presenting a structured performance for an audience, which is something I really believe in as a principle. But at the same time, I'm giving myself the risk and myself the excitement of developing something new. And I truly feel that conveys to the audience, too. You know, when you're on the edge, even in the studio, it's something we plan for us. When I'm recording my drum parts, I always leave some of them unrehearsed so that there's a sense of danger, there's a sense of risk, and also you might get the sense from a certain passage that it's never been played exactly that way before. And a drum solo is like that. Of course, it's never the same 2 nights in a row, but structurally as a performance, as a piece of music, it is conceived of that way.
And Alex said that he invented an egg cup holder.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's perhaps a little-known fact what a musical genius Alex is, as Geddy and I refer to him. And yeah, one of my favorite breakfasts is soft-boiled eggs, for which, of course, you need an egg cup. But when we were in Bearsville recording, there was no such implement available. So Alex, in his boundless creativity, created me one, and what an egg cup it was, too. It was made of silver foil with all kinds of wings poking out of it, and it wasn't just your garden variety egg cup.
Is it on your shelf with the rest of your awards, your Junos and everything?
It's among the mementos of the session, actually. It seems that during every project, there's like a group of objects that become important to the making of it and are always there. And one album, it was lava lamps, and other times it'll be like hockey pennants or just some little objects that accumulate like little icons. And this became part of that through the whole process, that there were a lineup of little items that were inspirational and amusing to us, and the egg cup became a permanent member of it. It was always perched on one of the monitors in the studio control room.
Neil, again, thank you so much for taking the time to visit with us, to talk about your drumming and the lyrics on Test for Echo. Sometimes it's easier to drag Alex and Geddy into things than it is to you, and I know that it's a special, rare treat for your fans to be able to have you be here this evening.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.